The hidden child no one spoke about. The hammering on the door came at 3 in the morning. It wasn't a polite knock, not a neighborly tap. This was a brutal, insistent assault, each blow echoing through the small apartment, rattling the very foundations of Irina Sendler's fragile peace. Irina jolted awake, her heart already a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. Fear, cold and sharp, immediately seized her. Outside, boots scraped heavily up the staircase, each thud a chilling countdown. Harsh German syllables, guttural and menacing, ricocheted off the walls, sealing her fate, or so it seemed. She had exactly 30 seconds. 30 seconds to decide which secret was more dangerous, which one held the power to condemn her and so many others to death. Was it the stack of meticulously forged papers lying innocently on her kitchen table, documents that could instantly transform a Jewish child into a Polish Catholic? Or was it the slim glass jar carefully buried deep in her neighbor's garden, the one that held the real names, the true identities of 2,500 Jewish children the Nazis believed had simply vanished? In that terrifying, agonizing half-minute, Irina Sendler faced an impossible choice, a choice between two equally perilous truths, each one a testament to the extraordinary, heartbreaking courage she embodied. Before we can truly grasp the monumental bravery of Irina Sendler and the children nobody spoke about, we first need to understand the city that tried so desperately to erase them. We need to conjure the ghost of Warsaw, specifically its Jewish quarter, as it was brutally transformed under Nazi occupation. In October 1940, the Germans didn't just announce the Warsaw Ghetto, they created a living tomb. Overnight, an entire world was uprooted and compressed. 400,000 Jews, roughly 30% of the city's vibrant population, a community that had thrived for centuries, were violently squeezed into just over 1 square mile. Imagine that density, families of 10 crammed into single rooms, entire streets overflowing with desperate souls. Then came the walls. Not just fences, but brick walls, 15 feet high, topped with jagged barbed wire and shards of broken glass, glinting menacingly in the sun. These weren't just physical barriers, they were psychological ones designed to isolate, dehumanize, and imprison. Guards, armed and merciless, patrolled these perimeters. They shot first, asked never. Life inside became a slow, agonizing death sentence. Food rations plummeted to an average of just 184 calories a day, barely enough to sustain a toddler, let alone an adult performing manual labor. A single slice of stale bread, a precious commodity, could cost a day's wages if you were lucky enough to have work. Children, their faces gaunt and hollowed out like those of old men, wandered the streets begging for scraps, their eyes reflecting an unspeakable wisdom born of starvation. Typhus, a silent killer, bred relentlessly in the squalid, overcrowded basements, sweeping through the population like a wildfire. By July 1942, the nightmare escalated to an unimaginable horror. Trains, cattle cars packed with human cargo began leaving daily for Treblinka, a name that would forever be synonymous with industrialized murder just 60 miles northeast. The ghetto's terrifying death rate, a damning indictment of Nazi policy, had to be hidden from the world. So the SS simply deported the evidence. Families were given a brutal 15 minutes to pack their entire lives, a cruel mockery of preparation. Luggage, often too bulky to fit through the narrow doors of the cattle cars, was thrown from balconies onto the cobblestones below, shattering possessions and hopes alike. The air was thick with screams, the rumble of trains, and the chilling silence of despair. When those gates slammed shut, sealing the fate of thousands, parents did what parents have always done throughout history. They looked for someone, anyone who could save at least the children. They made the agonizing choice to sacrifice their own last moments with their sons and daughters, holding on to the slimmest thread of hope that their lineage, their future, might somehow survive. And that's where Irina Sendler steps into this suffocating darkness. Picture her, 31 years old, her blonde hair neatly pulled into a tidy bun. A simple social welfare badge pinned to her coat. To the German guards, she was just another Polish administrator, a seemingly unremarkable woman permitted inside the ghetto to inspect sanitary conditions, a task they likely considered mundane and beneath their notice. They saw her as a cog in the bureaucratic machine, nothing more. but to the Jewish doctors within the ghetto to whom she secretly smuggled life-saving medicine, she was something else entirely. They called her the Angel with the Strange Eyes, a title that spoke volumes about her unwavering compassion and the fierce determination burning behind her gaze. Irina hadn't arrived at this point by chance. She had grown up in a household steeped in a profound sense of human dignity and equality. Her father, Stanislaw Sendler, was a physician, a man who instilled in her a simple yet revolutionary truth. People were people, full stop. There were no distinctions based on religion, race, or social standing. Everyone deserved care, respect, and compassion. This wasn't just a philosophy for him, it was a way of life. He treated Jewish patients whom other doctors, fearing social ostracization or worse, refused to see. And tragically, he paid the ultimate price for his unwavering principles, dying of typhus when Irina was just 7 years old, likely contracted from one of his patients. That devastating loss taught young Irina a harsh but indelible lesson. Decency, true human decency, can cost you everything: your health, your life, your very existence. And yet she learned, you pay it anyway. You pay it because it's the right thing to do, because humanity demands it. So when the deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto ramped up to a horrifying scale, in December 1942, Irina Sendler didn't succumb to despair or paralysis. She didn't ask, as so many might have, what can one person possibly do against such overwhelming evil? Instead, her question was far more proactive, far more defiant. Who can I convince to help me do the impossible? It was a question that would define her life, a challenge she embraced with every fibre of her being, knowing full well the unimaginable risks involved. She refused to look away, refused to be a passive observer of genocide. Instead, she chose to become an active participant in the desperate, clandestine fight for survival, a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. The first child Irina Sendler carried out of that hellish ghetto wasn't just a number. He was 5-year-old Zbigniew. His mother, a woman etched with the lines of starvation and despair, pressed a tiny silver mezuzah, a sacred Jewish scroll, into Irina's palm. It was a tangible piece of their heritage, a desperate plea for memory, and she whispered, her voice raw with suppressed grief, "When he comes back, tell him who he is." Can you imagine the weight of that moment? The silent promise Irina made, knowing the odds were stacked against them all. Irina, masking her terror with a calm facade, tucked the boy under a potato sack in the back of a delivery truck. Her own heart hammered so loudly, so violently, she was convinced the German guards at the checkpoint would hear its frantic rhythm. Every bump in the road, every creak of the truck felt like an accusation. At the checkpoint, she forced herself to step out, to meet the guard's eyes, to smile politely, a performance of normalcy that felt utterly surreal. She produced a meticulously forged permit, a document declaring the truck was carrying spoiled food disposal. The guard, his nose wrinkling in disgust at the imagined stench, waved her through, eager to be rid of the unpleasantness. Once the truck cleared the gates, once they were truly beyond the walls of the ghetto, Zbigniew emerged, blinking wide-eyed from beneath the rough burlap sack. He squinted at the sun, a sun he hadn't truly seen, truly felt for months, perhaps even years, trapped as he was in the perpetual twilight of the ghetto. That night, he was placed with a Catholic family outside the city, a family brave enough to risk everything. He got a new name, a new identity, a new prayer book, and a haircut to hide the telltale curls that might betray his Jewish heritage. More importantly, he got to live. One down, 299 to go. It was an impossible task, a drop in the ocean of suffering, but for Zbigniew it was everything. It was a miracle, a testament to the fact that even in the face of absolute evil, individual acts of courage could and did make a profound difference. And for Irina, it was just the beginning. Irina Sendler, with her sharp intellect and even sharper moral compass, quickly realized that saving children solo was an endeavor akin to bailing out the entire ocean with a teaspoon. The scale of the horror, the sheer number of children needing rescue, demanded something far grander, far more organized. So she didn't just save children, she built a network, an intricate web of courage and defiance. Its code name was Żegota, the Council to Aid Jews, and it was absolutely unique. This wasn't just another underground resistance group fighting the Nazis. Żegota was the only underground organization in all of occupied Europe created solely, explicitly, to help Jews survive. It was an audacious, almost suicidal undertaking, yet it became a lifeline for thousands. Imagine the ingenuity, the sheer audacity required. Inside the ghetto, Jewish nurses risking their lives daily taught toddlers to recite Our Father and Hail Mary. Why? So these innocent children, if stopped by German patrols, could convincingly pass as Catholic. Outside, Polish garbage collectors, seemingly ordinary men going about their dirty work, doubled as couriers, hiding children in their trash bins, the stench of refuse ironically masking the scent of life. A mechanic, with nimble fingers and a brave heart, rigged a false bottom in a hearse, transforming a vehicle of death into a vessel of escape. A carpenter, equally resourceful, hollowed out toolboxes, turning them into temporary, terrifying cocoons for infants. One particularly poignant story involves a 19-year-old student named Jadwiga. She carried infants out in a wooden carpenter's stretcher, the baby sedated with a few drops of brandy so its cries wouldn't betray them. Can you picture the terror, the delicate balance between life and death held in the hands of such a young woman? Another volunteer, posing as a trolley driver, utilized a secret compartment under the floorboards where tickets normally went, smuggling children out one by one. Every single rescue wasn't a solo act. It was a symphony of courage requiring at least a dozen ordinary people, each playing a critical role. There was the forger, his hands steady, who meticulously aged new birth certificates to match the child's new identity. There was the priest, his conscience guiding him, willing to issue a baptismal record for a Jewish child. And there was the farmer, his land providing cover, who agreed to board a cousin's niece, knowing full well the lethal risk. The Nazis had made their policy chillingly clear. If you were caught aiding Jews, you and your entire family would be shot, immediately, without trial. It was a brutal deterrent designed to crush any flicker of human compassion. But Żegota's answer to this terror was brilliant, pragmatic, and deeply human. Recruit people who were already risking their lives for other reasons. The forger needed ration coupons to feed his family. The priest was driven by a fervent opposition to Nazi racial ideology. The farmer needed cash, perhaps to keep his own family from starvation. These were not saints in shining armor. They were ordinary people, each with their own needs and beliefs, but united by a shared, desperate cause. It was a powerful testament to shared risk, shared conscience, and ultimately a shared victory against overwhelming odds. This network, with no name in the official records, became the anonymous collective heartbeat of hope for 2,500 children. In the midst of this clandestine war for survival, Irina Sendler understood something profound about identity. Each time a child successfully crossed the ghetto wall, each time they were given a new name, a new life, Irina performed a ritual of remembrance. She wrote down two names, the child's original, sacred Jewish name and the new, fabricated Polish name. She folded the small piece of paper tight, almost like a cigarette, a tiny scroll holding a universe of meaning. Then she carefully sealed it inside a slim glass jar. These weren't just records, they were promises. These jars, filled with fragile slips of paper, were then buried. Not in some grand archive, but under an apple tree in her friend's backyard, a seemingly innocuous spot. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was insurance. Insurance for a future reunion, a desperate hope that one day, when the war's madness finally ended, parents might find their children, and children might find themselves again. She understood that the trauma of war could strip away everything, but a name, a true name, was a tether. In her own poignant words, a name is a tether to a universe that tried to erase you. It was a link to family, to heritage, to a personal history that the Nazis were determined to obliterate. As the months of terror stretched into years, the apple tree in that quiet backyard grew, and beneath its branches, a small cemetery of jars accumulated. Each jar was a silent witness, a preserved heartbeat against the crushing silence of genocide. By the summer of 1943, that tree shaded not just fruit, but the buried hopes of a generation. Each glass vessel held not just a piece of paper, but a child's soul, a fragment of memory, a defiant refusal to let them be forgotten. These jars were Irina's secret archive, her personal act of resistance, a quiet, powerful assertion that every child mattered, every life had a history, and every name deserved to be remembered. They were a testament to her unwavering belief that identity, once lost, could one day be reclaimed, a bridge between a shattered past and a hopeful, if uncertain, future. The precarious world Irina Sendler had so carefully constructed came crashing down on October 20th, 1943. The Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, kicked in her door with brutal force, shattering the quiet of her apartment and, for a terrifying moment, her sense of security. They had been watching her, tracking her, and now they had her. They seized her files, her codebook, and even a small, poignant toy bear that one child had left behind, a heartbreaking piece of evidence, a silent testament to the lives she was trying to save. At their headquarters, the interrogation began. It wasn't a questioning. It was a systematic attempt to break her. They broke her feet with clubs, each blow a searing agony, demanding names. They wanted to know the identities of the families hiding the children, the details of her network, the locations of the precious jars. But Irina, despite the excruciating pain, gave them nothing. Her silence was a fortress, her resolve unyielding. She knew that any information, any whisper, would condemn countless innocent people to death. She would not betray them. When the torture failed to extract a single useful word, the SS, frustrated and enraged, decided on a public spectacle. They printed posters, stark and chilling, declaring, "Irina Sendler executed for Jewish sympathizing." They marched her towards the ruins of the ghetto, a place already steeped in death and despair, intending to hang her publicly, to make an example of her, to crush any lingering hope of resistance. It was meant to be her final walk. But even in this darkest hour, the network she had built, Żegota, was working behind the scenes. En route to the execution site, a miracle occurred. A guard, his greed momentarily outweighing his loyalty to the regime, accepted a massive bribe. 2 sacks of American dollars, money that Żegota had painstakingly collected and hidden in a hearse, ironically, another vehicle used for their rescues. Irina, her body battered and broken, crawled out of the execution site with a shattered ankle and 3 new grey hairs, visible markers of the trauma she had endured. She was alive, but her life as she knew it was over. She spent the rest of the war in hiding, a ghost moving through the shadows of Warsaw, continuing her dangerous forgeries under the alias Clara. Every knock on the door of her safe house, every unexpected sound, made her flinch. Her heart leaping into her throat, the constant threat of discovery, the lingering pain of her injuries, the immense psychological burden of her work. It was a heavy cross to bear. Yet she kept writing names, kept burying jars, a defiant act of hope in a world consumed by darkness. Her courage was not just in facing death, but in choosing life repeatedly for herself and for every child whose name she protected. January 17th, 1945, the roar of Soviet tanks rolling down Marszałkowska Street finally signaled the liberation of Warsaw. But victory came to a city that was little more than a graveyard. The air hung heavy with the acrid smell of wet ash, the lingering scent of destruction mixing with the chilling dampness of thawing snow. The war was over, but the rebuilding, both physical and emotional, was just beginning. Irina Sendler, still limping from her shattered ankle, made her way to the apple tree, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she began the arduous, sacred task of unearthing the jars. Each scrape of the shovel, each clink of glass was a moment of profound anxiety. Glass cracked, dirt leaked inside, but miraculously, the ink on those precious slips of paper had survived. The names, the true identities, were still there. For weeks, Irina embarked on a new, equally heartbreaking mission. She traveled tirelessly, visiting convents, orphanages, remote farms, any place where a hidden child might have found refuge. She whispered forgotten names to nuns and farmers, hoping to spark a memory, to find a match. Reunions, when they happened, were often bittersweet, tinged with an unbearable sorrow. Some parents returned from the extermination camps, their arms tattooed with numbers, their eyes hollow and unfocused, forever haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. They had survived, but a part of them had died, and they struggled to reconnect with children who had grown up in their absence, in a world entirely different from the one they remembered. Others, tragically, never returned at all. their families wiped out entirely, leaving the children truly orphaned. The children themselves faced an immense, often bewildering challenge of identity. Many had spent years living as Catholics, learning new prayers, new customs, sometimes even forgetting their original language and heritage. Reclaiming their Jewish identity felt, for some, like trying on borrowed clothes 2 sizes too big, unfamiliar, uncomfortable, a painful reminder of what had been lost. They had survived by becoming someone else, and now they were being asked to shed that protective skin. One boy, grappling with this profound internal conflict, asked if he could keep both names, just in case. It was a heartbreaking plea, a testament to the fractured sense of self that many carried. Irina, understanding the profound weight of aliases, could empathize deeply. She herself had used the name Clara for so long that she sometimes signed it by mistake on official letters. Of the 2,500 children Irina and her network saved, roughly 400 were eventually reunited with surviving family members. The rest either stayed with their courageous rescuers, who had become their de facto parents, or emigrated, seeking new lives in distant lands. All of them, every single one, carried 2 birthdays from then on, the day they were born into their original families, and the day they climbed out of a potato sack, a toolbox, or a hearse, and started breathing free air, reborn into a world that offered a second chance at life. Their survival was a miracle, but their journey of healing and self-discovery would last a lifetime. After the war, a new kind of shadow fell over Poland. The country, liberated from Nazi occupation, soon found itself trapped behind the Iron Curtain, firmly under the thumb of the Soviet Union. And with this new political reality came a new narrative, a new history. The communist government, in its effort to consolidate power and promote a specific national identity, found stories of Polish rescuers aiding Jews inconvenient. It muddied their carefully constructed narrative of universal Polish victimhood, suggesting a more complex, nuanced reality that didn't fit their political agenda. Consequently, Irina Sendler's incredible files, her meticulously kept records of courage and rescue, were boxed up, relegated to dusty shelves. Her medals, when they were awarded, were done so quietly, almost secretly, in back rooms far from the public eye. In classrooms across Poland, history books dutifully mentioned the heroic Warsaw Uprising, a testament to Polish resistance against the Nazis, but they conspicuously skipped over the ghetto's children, the Jewish victims, and the Poles who risked everything to save them. It was as if this entire chapter of history had simply ceased to exist. The survivors themselves, the now grown hidden children, often kept quiet too. Some feared anti-Semitic reprisals, a chilling undercurrent that persisted even after the war. Others simply wanted to move on, to forget the trauma, to build new lives free from the spectre of their past. The scars were deep, the memories too painful to revisit, the burden of their survival too heavy to articulate. For 4 decades, the glass jars, those sacred vessels of identity, sat on a basement shelf, their labels slowly peeling, their contents a forgotten testament. The hidden children became the hidden adults, carrying their secrets, their dual identities through life. They married, changed surnames and told their own children they were just Catholic, a simple, protective lie. Silence, they learned, felt safer than explanation. It was a silence born of trauma, political suppression, and the universal human desire to simply belong, to finally find peace after such unimaginable upheaval. Then, in 1999, something truly extraordinary happened, something that started with the most unlikely of catalysts. 4 high school students from rural Kansas, ordinary teenagers in an ordinary American town, were tasked with picking a year-long history project out of a hat. The slip of paper they drew read simply, Irina Sendler. They Googled her name, a relatively new concept back then, and found just 2 paragraphs, a meager entry in the vast expanse of the internet. The number 2,500 children saved leaped out at them, and they immediately assumed it was a typo. How could one person save so many? It seemed impossible. So, driven by youthful curiosity and a budding sense of justice, they wrote a letter to Warsaw. To their astonishment, Irina Sendler, then 89 years old, invited them for tea. In her modest apartment, she showed them the cracked jars, the physical embodiment of her life's work, the tangible proof that the number wasn't a typo. These teenagers, whose lives had been so far removed from the horrors of the Holocaust, were suddenly face to face with a living legend, a quiet hero whose story had been buried for decades. They returned home, profoundly changed, and created a simple website, a digital testament to Irina's courage. They performed a short play, Life in a Jar, in cafeterias and churches, sharing her story with anyone who would listen. And then something incredible began to happen. Words spread, slowly at first, then like wildfire. Emails started arriving, hesitant and emotional, from hidden children, now in their 60s and 70s. "I was the boy in the hearse," one wrote. "I was the baby in the toolbox," another confessed. These were the voices of the silenced finally finding their way home. The story gained momentum. Oprah called. The BBC followed. Suddenly, the woman who had been erased by both Nazis and communists, the quiet hero who had lived in obscurity for so long, was receiving state honours on Polish television, her image broadcast across the nation. Irina, watching the awards ceremony from her sofa, remained utterly puzzled by all the fuss. "I only did what was obvious," she told reporters, her humility as profound as her courage. The real heroes were the mothers who let go, who made the agonizing choice to entrust their children to strangers, and the families who took strangers in, risking their own lives to give those children a future. Her words cut through the noise, reminding everyone that heroism isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about the simple, profound act of human connection and compassion in the face of unimaginable evil. If you want to see those Kansas students' original website, Life in a Jar, and then read letters from the hidden children themselves, those powerful rediscovered voices, I've put a link right below. It's a tiny, unassuming corner of the internet where history doesn't feel like a dusty textbook. It feels like a living room conversation, intimate and deeply personal. Irina Sendler died in May 2008, just short of her 99th birthday. Her life had spanned nearly a century, encompassing some of humanity's darkest hours and some of its most profound acts of grace. Nurses at the hospice where she spent her final nights said she was restless, her mind still working, still searching. On her very last night, she asked for paper. They thought perhaps she wanted to update her will, to settle some final earthly affairs. Instead, with a strength that belied her age and frailty, she wrote one single, powerful line. "Tell them I counted every heartbeat." It was her final message, her ultimate testament to the profound value of every single life she had touched. At her funeral, the church was filled to overflowing, a testament to the countless lives she had saved, the generations she had allowed to flourish. Survivors, now elderly themselves, filled the pews. Some wore stars of David, openly displaying their Jewish heritage, a freedom they owed to Irina. Others wore small crosses, quiet symbols of the Catholic families who had sheltered them, the identities they had adopted to survive. Together, in a moment of profound unity and shared remembrance, they recited a list of names, half Jewish, half Polish, all family, all bound by the extraordinary woman they had come to honor. When they finished, a woman in the back row, her eyes glistening with tears, stepped forward. In her hand, she held a tiny silver mezuzah, a sacred symbol of Jewish faith. With a gentle, reverent hand, she pressed it into Irina's casket. It was Zbigniew's daughter, the child Irina had first carried out of the ghetto under a potato sack. And as she placed the mezuzah, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "My father finally came back." It was a full circle moment, a powerful echo of a mother's desperate plea so many decades ago, a testament to Irina's unwavering promise, fulfilled not just for Zbigniew, but for every child whose heartbeat she had counted, every name she had preserved. So, what do we do with a story like Irina Sendler's, a story that almost vanished, almost swallowed by the tides of history and political expediency? We don't just remember it, we repeat it. We repeat the names Irina fought so valiantly to preserve, the names that represent not just individuals, but entire universes of memory and potential. We remember that courage isn't always loud, isn't always a thunderous roar on a battlefield. Sometimes, more often than we realize, courage is a whispered prayer in the back of a hearse, a meticulously forged date on a birth certificate, a fragile glass jar buried under an apple tree. It's in the quiet, defiant acts of compassion that stand against overwhelming cruelty, and crucially, we remind ourselves, especially in times when the world feels chaotic and empathy seems scarce, that ordinary people can and do choose to become extraordinary lifelines. They can be the ones who refuse to look away, who choose action over apathy, who see shared humanity instead of manufactured divisions. History isn't just the horrors we failed to stop, the tragedies that consumed us. It's also, profoundly, the quiet victories we refuse to forget, the sparks of light that pierce the deepest darkness. Irina Sendler's legacy isn't just about saving lives, it's about reminding us of our own capacity for goodness, our own potential to be that lifeline for someone else. If you'd like to keep these voices alive, if you believe this story deserves to be heard, please hit share. Let someone else meet the woman who saved 2,500 children, one heartbeat, one name, one incredibly brave act at a time. And if you're curious how the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising ties into this powerful narrative, check out the next video popping up on your screen right now.